Yo, happy 4th of July. Yeah, 4th of July. Jacob Williams, least favorite holiday. Anyway, no one will understand that but you. So I'll spare myself. But anyway, happy to have you guys with us. We got live before lock. My audio is playing back in my ear for a second. Hold on.
It was Jacob's mic being on. We're good now.
All right, there we go. Threw me off. Happy to have you guys with us. 4th of July. Hopefully you guys have some fun planned. Maybe you're down the beach. Maybe you're doing something. Either way, you're here right now. And we got a 7-game slate. Then you got a 2-game, like 4 o'clock slate. You have a 4-game main slate at 7 o'clock. Greg Ehrenberg with me. It's been a while. What's up, brother?
Yeah, man. We just haven't had many shows together as of late because usually doing the strategy shows. I usually have meetings then. But yeah, happy to be doing a show with you. We got 4th of July here and not too much bad weather also, which is a positive because there's been a lot of slates where we have to deal with shitty weather spots, which is the worst thing to deal with in baseball. So celebrating the holiday, hanging out, talking baseball.
Yeah, man. Are you doing anything?
No. I've got the house to myself. Everybody's gone. I might go like hit golf balls, the range or something. Been playing more golf lately. Other than that, absolutely just fuck nothing.
All right. I got the shirt ready, man. That's a solid shirt right there. we're in business. I got like 8 different types of these stupid shirts for 4th of July. But yeah, happy Independence Day, everyone. Let's get into it. So
what are you doing?
What's that?
What are you doing? What are you doing today?
So Saturday we're doing something like going over to my brother and sister-in-law's, hang out there, drink, barbecue. But we're gonna have some people, just like some family, a few friends over today for some burgers and dogs. Low key, keep it low key, but do a little something. You kind of have to. It's a fun holiday for sure. But let's get into it. First thing I wanted to ask you about before we dive into anything. By the way, guys, hit that thumbs up if you be so kind. Subscribe to the channel. All of that goes a very long way for us. If you haven't done so, take a single second, atone for your sins here on the 4th of July. But the weather in this Minnesota-Detroit game, that one to me seems kind of worrisome.
Nothing that I'm altering my lineups for right now. I'll pull it back up.
I was looking at the radar about an hour ago and it looked horrible.
Yeah, it does look worse than it did this morning. So at the start of the game, no real issues. It looks like, well, potential, like low chance of rain right now, like 30% early on in the game. And then as you get into the later stage of the game, like 70% chance of rain. So I guess it's going to be a matter of when that rain starts. But yeah, it does look worse than it did earlier, which sucks because I just said that this is a slate where we don't have to deal with any weather concerns. Then I just rechecked the weather. And yeah, you're right. It's not ideal in Minnesota. And we Bailey Ober in that game.
I know, against Detroit. So it makes it for a weird spot. I think I don't know. How do you end up playing something like this? Because, from a timing perspective, that's a 1 o'clock game. So it is going to start with, with 4 other games. So there's 5 at 1 and then there's 2 at 2. Do you like where it stands right now? I think what I probably do, God, I don't know. I was going to say maybe just limit exposure to Bailey Ober and not have him ruin my day in the event that the things go bad.
Here's what's hard about it is, while it does look like it's going to rain at some point in Minnesota, it might not start until after the game ends.
Right.
And then there's also, it looks like the most likely scenario is it doesn't start until the later innings of the game. And I do think Bailey Ober is probably the best overall pitching option on the slate. My inclination is just to kind of play it as is. And then if it does rain, we run into that issue. Hopefully it's not until like the 7th, 8th, 9th inning.
And if that's the case, it shouldn't matter anyway. Yeah, I get it. I mean, just from a pitching perspective in general, you've got Michael King and Nick Pivetta against Miami. A few games like you just don't have to worry at all because they're in a dome. But the 3 guys that are pulling considerable ownership on a 7-gamer, King, Pivetta, and Ober, all of them 27+%. You like Ober the best of the 3, assuming weather holds out?
I do. And also something else to note about some of the weather that I've noticed how people have reacted to it lately by looking at the post-contest sims. When we've had some of these dicey weather situations, I personally have been pulling that game for my player pool but so has the field at
I
such a
know.
crazy rate where, for example, we had 2 days ago, there was the game that kind of had dicey weather in Kansas City. And then as a result, if you check the post contest sims, stacks of the Royals and the Rays in that game had like 25 and 30% expected ROIs because the ownership came in so much lower than projected with everybody getting off the game. And then what ended up our post contest data showing, those were the only profitable stacks to play on the entire slate because they were so overwhelmingly profitable. So I'm also kind of just looking at that and the way the field has been reacting. And it seems like there's such a big advantage to playing these weather spots because of how much the field has been ejecting.
I think you're right. There was a spot. When was this? It was a couple weeks ago, and I ended up just playing him anyway because it was a really good spot. I can't remember who it was. It was a really good spot. And funny thing is, oh, you know who it was? It was Pablo Lopez.
Mm-hmm.
Pablo Lopez. He got shelled anyway, so it didn't matter. And then that game got delayed in like the sixth or something. It truly wouldn't have mattered. He was terrible. But I got very overweight on him. I thought the field would still have some. He ended up being like virtually unowned. And I know it was a bad weather spot, but it was also similar to this where it's like, yeah, the weather might hold out until, the seventh inning or something, which in that case, you're fine with it. You're right, though. Like it was, I've seen a lot of that this year where people are just playing far. And a lot of it's just, more knowledge, right? Like they're more tuned in. They're more understanding of like with baseball, you have to pay attention to this weather. Where before you would just see a ton of dead lineups as a result of weather.
Yeah. And I mean, now it's not like they go completely unowned, but kind of close to it. The one you're thinking of, it was the Tampa Bay Rays against the Minnesota Twins,
and
which I remember
Pablo
was really
Lopez,
hard. Yeah. It was really hard to build lineups for it in the contest generator just because I knew the ownership was going to get skewed by the rain, but it was so hard to figure out what it was going to be. Because I remember that was a day where Pablo Lopez was projected for, it was like 35% ownership or something really significant. And to your point, he ended up being like 5% owned or something. So I'm most inclined just from reviewing the post contest sims to just play this game unless a couple scenarios. Number one, if the weather just looks considerably worse in the next 30 minutes, that would cause me to change my opinion. Obviously, if the game gets canceled in advance, or if the game starts in a rain delay, then I do assume it doesn't end up playing.
If it starts in a rain delay, because that seems like a decent, yeah. I mean, do they really want to, you're really going to hold out for like however many hours? I don't see it. Plus, it's another thing to consider is it's a divisional game. They're easy to make up. They're far easier to make up than if they were facing like, the Phillies or something like that. It just, like a divisional game, not some interleague play. Yeah. We'll get into it though. As of now, I think I'll probably be sticking with Bailey Ober. Michael King against Texas is interesting. He's pulling 33%. Texas is one of those teams, and we've talked about it all year long on this show, and it's only become more pronounced lately, but they're one of these teams that, they're the reigning champs, but and they don't strike out a lot. That's one significant thing. Look at their numbers against righties, though, on the active roster. They're bad. Like, you're talking bottom 5, bottom 6 across the board on the active roster against right-handed pitching. So like, they've been outside of the strikeouts, actually a good matchup for righty arms all season long.
One other thing about this slate, when we're talking about these pay-up options, it's in reference to them being the most expensive pitchers on the slate, but there's nobody priced over $9K on DraftKings on the early slate. If you look over, FanDuel's got like a different slate where they've got different mixes of games today. But same thing over there. We don't have super expensive pitchers. There's nobody priced over 10K over on FanDuel. So it's very, very easy to pay up for pitchers and still kind of be able to fit in whatever offenses you want. So with that being the case, when we're looking at some of the fantasy point projections, there isn't that much opportunity cost to paying up a pitcher.
I want to circle back real quick just for people watching that may be wondering like where we left off on that weather conversation, because it's actually a really big deal. So are you saying that based on the ownership that you've seen coming in these potential rain spots, that you almost think strategically, and I'm not talking about like a monsoon's coming through, right? But, sketchy, but we're not sure. do you think strategically it makes sense to start maybe not being quite as worried or tamping down your exposure as much because the field basically gets none of them at this point?
Yeah. So the issue that I've seen with it, just by reviewing some of these slates in the post contest sims, is that if you avoid the weather games and the game ends up playing, then there is obviously the safe aspect where it's like, hey, I have no chance of my lineups being dead if the game ends up being, kind of a dicey weather situation. You avoid it. But then by reviewing the post contest sims, what ends up happening is if you don't play those games, then you're expected to lose on the slate anyway.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a good point. Some of these pitchers are really cheap today. Framber Valdez is only getting 12% ownership. I know he's not a high K rate guy, but 75%. This Toronto team is just not particularly good. I think you just put in chat that Bo Bichette got scratched as well.
Yeah, we are on a streak of something like 48 of the last 50 MLB slates. There's been some sort of late scratch after a lineup has come out. So that stays alive. Bo Bichette, he is not in the lineup on 4th of July anymore, which obviously is relevant. You bring up Framber Valdez right now.
Yeah, I just, I look at him, he's 7,500. The thing that always kind of intrigues me about Valdez, particularly when he's at a cheap price point, you've got a guy that he's just so wildly inconsistent, which is kind of good and bad. But he's also the type of guy that can go out there and go, 7 scoreless with 6 strikeouts, we've seen it. Like, got blown up last game before that, 7 1-run innings with 7 Ks, then was whatever, then got blown up against San Francisco, then complete game 1-run, 8 strikeouts against the Angels, 7 1-run innings, 4 Ks against Minnesota. You see where I'm going here. Like, he is an odd pitcher in that sense.
The other thing that's really weird, so Framber Valdez has not been great this year relative to other years. 4.11 ERA, 4.03 expected ERA. While he's never been a super high strikeout guy, he's a 23% K rate for his career. It's down to 19% this year. Something's different. It's really hard for me to figure out what it is by looking at his pitch mix and his numbers. Like, his velocity is way up this year, which you would think would be a positive. You think that would generate more soft contact, more swing and misses. He has a 96.1 average mile per hour on his fastball this year. It's 93.5 for his career. It's not up a little bit. It is way up his fastball velocity. Maybe he's throwing harder, and that's causing him to not locate quite as well. But even like his contact numbers, he isn't giving up more hard contact than in other years. 33.9% hard contact rate, 33.2% for his career. So it's kind of hard to pinpoint what it is that's gone wrong with Framber Valdez this season. I tend to think he's going to be better going forward, but like, there's nothing in his underlying numbers that suggest he's been unlucky. It's just he's not producing as good results, but there's like no drop off in his stuff. If anything, his stuff is better than it's ever been.
I know. That's weird. 7,500. I mean, is Ben Lively today really that much better of a play just because he's facing the White Sox?
It's such an easy matchup against the White Sox. Let me look.
But Ben Lively's not Ben Lively's not great. He's fine. Don't get me wrong. Ben Lively's not bad. He's got a decent matchup, but he's $8,200. You're paying for him.
So right now I have the same amount of Ben Lively and Framber Valdez, which has me about even with the field on Valdez and then underweight to the field on Ben Lively. I haven't updated my lineups though for Bo Bichette being removed from the Blue Jays lineup. So I do suspect when I update everything, I'll have more exposure to Valdez than to Ben Lively.
We just updated ownership in the Sims as well. I'm rerunning that contest generator and then the Sims in a minute. Let me see if we did for DraftKings recently. Yeah, I mean, Framber Valdez in our last update came down in ownership. He's positively leveraged. What about Christopher Sanchez at 9K? There are only 2 pitchers in baseball, I think 1 now, with a higher ground ball rate than Sanchez. I know this because I was betting all of the overs on him the other day against Miami because Miami has the highest ground ball rate by a mile of any other team. And this guy just induces worm burners. Like, he gets so many ground balls. I think he had a complete game. I think he threw a complete game last time out. he is good. He's not elite in the sense of like, 8, 9 strikeout type performances, but he's good. And he gets a ton of soft contact, a ton of ground balls, allows him to pitch deep into games, but he's the most expensive pitcher on the slate.
Yeah, he's kind of like what a better version of what Framber Valdez has been. He's like Framber Valdez from previous years. There is one thing that's going to regress about Christopher Sanchez. Do you know how many home runs he's allowed this year, Laffy?
One
home run the entire season.
It's amazing.
That's impossible. It's going to be more going forward. It just kind of has to be. So I do think he's going to regress a little bit going forward. There isn't a ton of strikeout upside there. He does make up for it a little bit, kind of like you mentioned, his ability to work deep into games, those extra innings pitched, the extra outs bonuses, that increases his ceiling a little bit on both DraftKings as well as FanDuel. The problem with Christopher Sanchez, though, that $9K price tag, realistically, I don't think he has much of a ceiling at that salary relative to the guys priced below him, like Bailey Ober, Michael King. These are better strikeout pitchers that have more of a ceiling there. So I prefer to roster them. It's not that Sanchez is unplayable. He's just not going to be in very many of my lineups.
And take it for what it's worth. He's also been markedly better at home this year. Way, way better at home. Not even close. Like Seattle pitcher type splits at home and on the road. It's really a stark difference with how much better he's been at Citizens Bank Park. Crazy. Maybe it's just variance. It's entirely possible, but he's been a lot better there. And then, all right. So the reason I'm asking you, and we're talking about all these pitchers, is because you mentioned it. There's nobody that really like fully separates. I think, especially from a price point, Max Scherzer threw 57 pitches in his season debut, 77 last time out. What do we expect him for today? Like 90? I think that's
hard to say because Max Scherzer has always been known as kind of a crazy wild man. Struck me as a guy who maybe the medical staff says like, hey, you're capped at 80 pitches. And he goes, no, fuck you guys. I'm pitching longer. But he's also at a point in his career where it seems he's been a little smarter with injuries. He's been more conservative. But then on the flip side, like, what are the Rangers saving him for at this point? They've been terrible this year. They don't seem very likely to make the playoffs. Maybe they need that kind of length out of him. I've not played Scherzer at all this season. Maybe this is the slate to take chances just because we don't really have elite pitchers. And then on top of that as well, you have, a shorter slate. He doesn't have all that much ownership. Like if there was a spot to take a chance on him, I think it probably would be today, but I don't know. I just haven't been playing him at all this year. He also doesn't project particularly well for us.
Yeah, I want to get there, but I'm not sure I will. You've still got him as what, the second highest priced pitcher on the slate?
And we have him, let's see, what do we have him as far as projections relative to other pitchers? Is this updated now for... Yeah, all right, so it's updated for the Blue Jays stuff now. And we have, so Max Scherzer's the second most expensive pitcher on the slate, and we have him with the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8th highest odds to be one of the top 2 scoring pitchers. Like we have him closer to being the worst pitcher on the slate than the best pitcher on the slate, considering his salary. It is kind of hard to get there. He's not wildly popular, but he's not unowned either. I'm probably just not going to land on Max Scherzer. I hope this isn't the spot where he goes off because I do want to be early to him as opposed to late to when he gets stretched out and starts to pitch well. I just don't think this is going to be the spot for me.
Probably not. And for what it's worth, this is a Kansas City team that really has limited amount of strikeouts. He has a 21% K rate through his first 2 starts, 11% swinging. What did I say?
You said Kansas City.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, San Diego. Really limited strikeouts. They have the lowest, if you look at their active roster K rate, lowest in the league against righties, lower than Cleveland, Houston, Kansas City, Texas, lowest is San Diego. They don't strike out a lot against righties. It's not a great matchup for him at all. I think I'm with you. I will tell you though, and I'm sure there are people in chat who would agree with me here. I don't know if our buddy Steven Leibowitz is in chat, but we were going back and forth on Twitter about this the other day. Nick Pivetta was cruising through the first 4 innings last time out, and then he turned into, that version of Nick Pivetta. Nick Pivetta's ownership today, no matter the matchup, is always terrifying. I mean, he's pulling 30% right now. Yes, it's a good spot. It's a pitcher-friendly venue, everything really, like, you check all of the boxes in favor of pitching here for Pivetta, no doubt about it. But 30%, I think I end up, and I'm rerunning the Sims now, as I mentioned. My guess is I end up biting the bullet and having a lot of Nick Pivetta today. It's a good spot.
Yeah, Nick Pivetta. So on my last run, my two most rostered pitchers, they were actually it wasn't. So it was Bailey Ober 1, Michael King 2, the Nick Pivetta 3, but still, Nick Pivetta is my third most rostered pitcher. I didn't have a massive stand on him. He is fairly popular, like you said. So I was about in line with the field. I do think, though, we could be getting some depressed ownership on Bailey Ober. So I'm actually going to build lineups in the contest generator and do a little bit of a down arrow on Bailey Ober just to lower his projected ownership, which I think is just going to get me to a ton of Bailey Ober. But I think that's what's going to end up happening with his ownership.
It's funny you say that. The only reason I didn't do that yet is because I want to see if I'm already going to be getting to a ton of Bailey Ober. I think I probably will. Yeah. Probably going to have it. I can't imagine it doesn't. But yeah, the top three, King, Pivetta, and Ober. So let's do this. Let's look at a few of these lesser owned guys. Now, I don't have interest in Kyle Tyler in this spot, Jared Schuster, Frankie Montas, Kenta Maeda. I mentioned Valdez. I think at 7,500, Valdez is perfectly reasonable. He does have that upside, even though he's not, a great strikeout pitcher. It's there. Similar to Christopher Sanchez. And actually, I think Framber Valdez, when I said there were a couple guys with higher ground ball rates than Sanchez, and then after last game, there was only one, I'm pretty sure Framber Valdez was the other one. I'm pretty sure he's got like a absurd ground ball rate. It's at 61.4% ground ball rate this year. So it speaks exactly to the same exact point I was talking about with Christopher Sanchez, Greg. It's like, if he's got his stuff, very good chance he goes 7-8 clean innings just because you're getting soft contact on ground balls. That's what you're hoping for guys like him or Sanchez.
Yeah. And I mean, also Framber Valdez is so cheap, right? Like he isn't really expensive because he hasn't pitched all that well this year. He isn't producing big fantasy point numbers because the strikeout rate is a career low at sub 20%. But I don't know, maybe it's a sample size issue with Framber Valdez. I know we're halfway through the season, but in reality, like a dozen or so starts, it's not like an overwhelming amount of information we have. It could just be, we'll look back on this, just be like, yeah, he just had like 10, 11, 12 kind of subpar starts and he was better later on. Like I was saying before, I just can't find anything in the numbers that suggests that Framber Valdez should be much worse.
Yeah, that's a good point. And to be fair, he's also had some really great starts. He's just had some terrible starts. That's what it is. He's not consistently bad or consistently good.
And I think also off the top of my head, this could just be total bullshit because I'm going off memory. I don't think it's even been related to some of the matchups he's been in. Like he's pitched poorly against some bad offenses, then he's pitched well against some good offenses. Pulling it up right now. Yeah, for reference, you could see just from his last handful of starts, last time out, he gets destroyed by the Mets. And I know the Mets have also been ridiculously good as of late, especially since the stupid Grimace thing. Like Grimace throws out the first pitch of a game and the Mets become the best team in baseball. Maybe the dumbest thing that's ever happened. But the start before that, he shuts down the Orioles. 7 innings, 1 run, 7 strikeouts. Then before that, he has an okay start against the White Sox. And before that, he gets destroyed by the Giants. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Like he pitches terribly in San Francisco against the Giants. Then a couple of starts later, he dominates the Baltimore Orioles. He's been, like you said, wildly inconsistent. And his best starts have not been correlated to whether he's facing a good or bad offense. Same with his worst starts. His overall worst start of the season came against the Los Angeles Angels. His overall best start of the season came against the Baltimore Orioles.
That's crazy. Yeah, it's a good point. It's a very good point. So, yeah, there might be something there. What about some of these guys in the middle? Like Marcus Stroman, I saw it. What's up, Einsteinium? By the way, I saw that comment. Happy 4th, brother. Talking about 7,700 Stroman against Cincinnati. I thought about that too, just in the set. Like, all right, yes, Cincinnati is a team that strikes out at a particularly high clip for his righties. You'd be surprised to know that they don't strike out for his lefty. Yesterday they did, but against lefties much at all. Much better against lefties But they strike out a lot against righties, second or third highest K rate in the league. Stroman has a 17% K rate. It's funny. One more time, Greg. It's weird slate, but he's another one of those guys that can go out and just has to pitch on efficiency and has to go deep into games. The issue that I've had with Stroman is he has not had that same efficiency and the ability to get like super deep into games like he used to. When you lean on Stroman, you're going, I hope he can give me 7 innings, 4 or 5 strikeouts. Like that's what you're hoping for from Stroman. Only allow a run or two, hopefully get the win. But there hasn't been kind of that longevity there as far as him getting deep into games, especially over the last couple of months. For me, it's been a real issue.
I think there's a very easy explanation for it. He's older. He's 33 years old now. Yeah. I just don't think he's as good of a pitcher as he was a few seasons ago. He's bounced around to a few different teams. We saw him start his career with the Blue Jays, was there for a while, goes for the Mets, to the Cubs, now to the Yankees. And even though he's never been a high strikeout pitcher, it's even lower now. For his career, 19.9% strikeout rate. It's actually only at 17.4% this year. So just kind of across the board, a lot of little things kind of line up to make Marcus Stroman a little bit worse than he used to be. And another thing that really stands out, 90.6 average miles per hour on his fastball. His career low average on his velocity, last year he was at 92.2. I think it's just an age issue.
You're probably right. There are plenty of times where I would probably go to Stroman in this spot, but see, one of those things where he's not so cheap to where you're like, oh man, Stroman's $6,600 today. I'll get some Stroman. It gets, great salary relief. He's right there in that same range with a lot of he's right there with Valdez. And then the 8K pitch, like Bassett 21% owned is interesting. We haven't even talked about him. Sorry for jumping all around on you guys, but Greg, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. There's 10 pitchers among 4 out of 14 that are getting double-digit ownership right now.
Yeah, and it kind of makes sense, right? Because we don't have one dominant starting pitcher on the slate. I think most people would agree the best overall option is Bailey Ober, and there's some people who are going to have hesitancy clicking on his name just because of the weather concerns. That's why his ownership doesn't project crazy highly. We have him projected for, I think it was 26% ownership. I'm rerunning Sims right now, so I don't have it in front of me, but it was somewhere 26. Around there, 25 or 26% with Bailey Ober. So yeah, it is really spread out at pitching. There isn't really any one superior option. So as a result, you just have people saying I'll play Bailey Ober in a quarter of my lineups. I'll play Michael King in a third of my lineups. And then beyond that, it's Nick Pivetta in some lineups. It's just really spread out.
I almost kind of like Cincy bats. The only thing is they're getting ownership again.
Yeah, I typically don't love stacking against Marcus Stroman just because he is a ground ball pitcher that, while he hasn't been great this year, it's not like he's a gas can either. He's just somebody really consistently. Stroman will pitch 6 innings, 3 runs, 4 strikeouts, where it's all right, you're not all that happy that if you roster him, you're typically not all that thrilled if you stacked against him either. But I'll see when I have everything rerun here if that ends up not being the case for me. I typically don't end up stacking against him very much, though.
I get it. Look, I'm with you, but the home run numbers have definitely been worse this year. A lot worse. Going to Yankee Stadium has not been kind to him from a power perspective. 10 of the 12 long balls he's given up this season have been at home. So I think there is something to be said about that, right? He's a ground ball pitcher, but what do the other rates look like? So at home, Marcus Stroman, 2.0 home runs per 9 with a 22% home run to fly ball rate. It's a pretty big number.
I mean, it's right around double. I think it's actually exactly what league average is. Last I looked, the league average home run to fly ball rate is 11.5%. So right around double that mark. If you look at the career numbers for Stroman, actually, Fangraphs has it at 12.5%.
For what?
His home run to fly ball rate.
No, at home.
Oh, at home. Gotcha.
I'm saying Yankee Stadium is such a homer-friendly park. It hasn't been kind to him this year.
Yeah, it makes sense. It might just not be an ideal ballpark for him to pitch in.
It's not. I almost don't mind the idea of just going one-offs here. because you make a good point earlier. He's not a guy that typically gets blown up, but maybe just some one-off spots or like 3-man Cincinnati stacks could be interesting. Or maybe some home run props as well, Greg. That always, like a Ellie De La Cruz. You got a bunch of guys with a bit of power from the left side of the plate in this spot, and he's given up a lot of power to lefties at home this year. Actually, I think more to righties at home. Let's see. Stroman, 2.1 home runs per 9. Really pick your poison at this point.
Yeah, and I just reran everything in the Sims. I didn't get to Cincinnati. I only have 1 out of 150 lineups that's a red stack.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me because they're pretty popular. I do like some individual spots there, though. Any other pitchers you want to talk about that we haven't gotten to yet? Somehow we have to talk about like every one of them.
Yeah, I mean, I've got everything updated now. Didn't get to much more for Ehrenberg Valdez, actually still right around 10%. So the pitchers that I only have 3 pitchers that I have more than 20% of, and it's Bailey Ober being number 1 for me, then Nick Pivetta, Michael King, and it's kind of in tiers. Bailey Ober in 40% of my lineups, Pivetta and King right around 30%. And then I've got just under 20% now of Chris Bassett, Ben Lively, and then around 10% of Stroman for Ehrenberg Valdez.
Did you bump ownership down on Bailey Ober in the contest generator?
Yes, I did.
You did. Okay. Yeah. And how much are you getting to of him now?
42.7% is the exact number.
42.7. All right. Oh, guys, I know this is a DFS show, but we have an awesome promo going on for Odd Shopper. We're talking about betting. We talk a lot of betting on the strategy show. Live Before Lock, not as much for the early slate, just because we're leading up and try and get you guys all the info you can. But if you're looking to just utilize all of the tools we have, whether it's for, standard sports betting on like DraftKings, FanDuel, Caesars, BetMGM, or all of the other pick'em sites, Prize Picks, Underdog, you name it, all of those, plus all of the expert picks, the premium Discord, which is growing at an awesome clip, the parlay builder, the pick'em optimizer builder. So basically building those lineups out. DraftKings Pick 6 is on there as well. The entire month of that, ending today, $17.76. I hope you understand why. Promo is $17.76. So use the link in the description or just go to oddshopper.com. The whole month, $17.76, more than it's usually $49.99 a month, Greg? $49.99 for Odd Shopper a month. So, over.
It's either, not that this makes a massive difference, but it's either $49.99 or $49.95. I forget which things are 99.95 cents. So
you didn't need to do that to me. It's around $50, and I'm saying it's $17.76.
Nobody knows for sure. Here's what we do know, though. It's $17.76 today, which, like Laffy said, I would hope people could figure out why $17.76, but you never know.
I hope so. Awesome stuff. I try and get in as many bets as humanly possible every day. And for those of you DFS players, you'll appreciate this. We have a mass entry tool. You can literally generate bets for a specific sports book and click bet now, and it loads every single one of them into your bet slip. It's like, it takes seconds to do all of that, and then a minute to place your bets, and you're done. You can do it throughout the day routinely. Highly suggest you take advantage of it if you're someone that's into betting, looking to get into betting, actually looking to make money with betting, because that's the whole purpose. And using these market-based tools, you're going to make money. You're going to. We have all the results. Oh, the EV results tool. Another awesome. Just check it out. You'll love it. And join the Discord. Say what's up when you do. Chris Bassett, Jamison Tyon, I don't think we need to say much about. He's getting 12%. Not a ton of strikeout stuff there. Even though Philly's hurt, I still don't love that matchup. Like, I don't like Tyon all that much at all. Houston's, whatever team. So you have Chris Bassett. But it really does feel like King, Pivetta, and Ober, right? And then the rest of those guys you just kind of sprinkle in.
Yeah, like if somebody which I know this always applies to the majority of the people who are watching our show, if you're building 1, 2, 3, 5 lineups, I wouldn't deviate from the Bailey, Ober, Nick Pivetta, Michael King tier of pitcher. If you're really uncomfortable with weather and don't want to touch Bailey Ober, then you could start to mix in some of the contrarian options. But I'm playing Bailey Ober. even if there are weather concerns there, I do think it's more likely to be in the middle of the game than it to be something that just outright means that we get a dud from Bailey Ober in terms of him only going like 2 or 3 innings. So I'm playing Bailey Ober. He's my most rostered pitcher. I think those are the top guys.
Me too. I'll end on this. We'll get to bats. Outside of Ober, though, my exposure is pretty flat. Like 16% Bassett, 17% Stroman. There you go, Einstein. I'm 17%, which I'm fine with. That's not going to make or break anything. Christopher Sanchez, I have 18%, Greg. And then 20% King, 20% Lively, 26% King, 27% Pavetta. So Ober's the only one that's really pulling away with a lot of exposure there for me.
Yeah, and same with me. Tier of his own, followed by Pavetta and King. And other guys, I don't even, the other guys that just make it into lineups, I don't feel great about any of them. You can make cases for them. There's nobody, like, I wouldn't come out and say, like, I feel great about Chris Bassett against the Houston Astros, or even Framber Valdez, like, yeah, I do.
Or a 9K Sanchez.
Yeah, Sanchez too expensive. So it's other guys that just kind of have to have around, 10% of to fill out lineups and whatnot, but nobody I love.
Let's talk about bats, because when you have a lot of pitcher exposure spread around, it means usually one of two things. Like, obviously there isn't one clear cut, like, amazing option on the slate, but also it either means there's just a ton of bad pitching, so you spread them around, or there's a lot of good pitching. And I think it's fair to say that while these guys aren't in great matchups, Sanchez is still good. Stroman's still fine. Bassett is still pretty good. Framber Valdez, overall, he's an above average pitcher. Taillon's fine. You look at all of these guys, Greg, there's only a few truly not great options on this slate as far as pitching goes, and only a few really high totals. So you're seeing a lot of that ownership going to Cleveland, to the Yankees, to Boston. Double-digit stack ownership on all three of them in our top stacks tool.
Yeah, and to me, the best overall option is the New York Yankees amongst the chalk options, because Frankie Montas is not great. There was a point in time where Frankie Montas was really good. It's kind of ironic he's pitching against the Yankees today, because the downfall of Montas's career appears to be when he got traded to the Yankees, but it also correlated with injuries where he had, I think it was a shoulder issue, if I remember correctly. And he's just never really bounced back from that. So you go back to 2022, that was really the start of him seeing a slide in his production. 4.05 ERA, 4 expected ERA. We saw a dip in his strikeout stuff. He misses pretty much all of last year due to injury. He throws 1 1/3 innings for the New York Yankees. Then so far this year, 4.23 ERA, 4.53 expected ERA. The biggest issue, though, this is a guy who for his career has a 23.6% strikeout rate. It's 18.6% this year. This is not the matchup to be struggling to generate swing and misses. If you're giving up contact to the Yankees in Yankee Stadium, it's just going to be bound to lead to extra base hits, to lead to homers. This is a very difficult team to pitch to contact to and just hope you're going to get lucky. So I like stacking against Frankie Montas. The Yankees are chalky, but of the 3 chalkiest stacks that you just brought up there, we've got 3 teams pulling double-digit exposure. I'm underweight to the other 2, and the Yankees have around 20% of that's my most rostered team.
Okay. Pretty crazy that Frankie Montas has done as solid a job of limiting power as he has this year. It is wild that he's allowed 2 home runs at home, Greg, at Great American Ballpark. That is nuts. Don't get me wrong. I still like the Yankees today, but he's done a surprisingly better job, given the, the lack of strikeouts, as you just pointed to, of limiting power than I would have thought. Like, he has a 117 X ISO against righties, 191 X ISO, 179 actual ISO versus lefties, which isn't great, but it's also not like gas can style either. So a little bit surprising on that for a guy that's not getting a lot of swing and misses.
Yeah. And has he pitched? He's pitched about equal home and road.
Yeah. 8 starts.
Other numbers this year. If we look at splits, he's got 4.14 ERA at home, 4.33 on the road. Underlying numbers, yeah, he's been crazy terrible on the road. Looking at his splits for the year. So and by the way, he is pitching on the road today in Yankee Stadium of all places. He has a 3.19 FIP and a 3.97 xFIP pitching in Cincinnati. Speaks to what you were talking about before. On the road this year for Frankie Montas, he is walking a ton more people as well. His walk rate at home is 6.3%. It's 13.1% on the road. So away from home, 5.76 FIP, 5.19 xFIP.
Yeah, someone on Twitter. These douchebags are already trying to put people on a game that clearly is going to get rained out. Why are you watching, dude? All this guy does is tweet and talk shit every time we do a show.
Which guy is this? It's probably somebody I've muted.
Nate Rojas.
Oh yeah, I've had him muted for a while. Because also it's like you said, and I mean obviously he's watching right now, so he just know this. There are people who will spend their days just not liking my content and telling me they don't like it. And cool, I think that there's no point in blocking them, because then if you block them, then they can't see it anymore. I'd rather they watch it, they can get upset about it, they can continue to tell us we're upset, and then I just never see it.
It's the way to do it, by the way. I never block.
They just yell into the wood. I don't know how many followers he has. If I had to guess, I would bet it's a very limited amount because he has nothing worthwhile to say. And now the person he's trying to direct that to, which is me, I don't see it. And then nobody else sees it because nobody follows him. So he just yell into the internet and nobody for a while.
Right. And to pretend that we're trying to put people on a game that's going to get rained out. I swear we spent the first 10 minutes discussing strategy around something like that. You make your own decisions when it comes to rain. I'm not a meteorologist, neither is Greg. But yeah, if you're not discussing what to do with that game at 1 o'clock, and I thought you made a pretty salient point. Like, hey, look, if people are all going to back off this game entirely and you end up getting like, what if you get 6 elite innings from Bailey Ober at a fraction of the ownership he might have been? All you're saying is that might be a risk you're willing to take.
Yeah, and I'm not saying it's not without risk. I'm just telling you guys what I'm doing. I'm playing it. If you don't want to play it because you think it's too risky, I get it. I don't think that I'm not going to guarantee you it plays. I'm not going to guarantee you it doesn't play either. I'm just telling you I'm playing it.
Einsteinium asks, should we be looking at Detroit for the same reasons Greg thinks Ober will have suppressed ownership? So you're saying like the depressed ownership across this entire game, does that make bats more interesting?
Yes. So
yeah,
of my, there's reason to all of my most rostered stacks. I have 4 teams that I have 10+% exposure to. One of them is the Yankees. The Yankees is the simplest explanation. They're the Yankees. They have a high-powered offense. They're going up against a pitcher who's not been great this year and has especially struggled on the road, right? So Yankees, they just make sense for that reason. Then if we look at the other teams I'm getting to the most of, the Minnesota Twins and the Detroit Tigers, those are also 2 of my 4 most rostered offenses. And a lot of it has to do with me thinking the ownership could be a little bit suppressed and just looking at the data in our post-contest sims, and it's showing us that not only the pitchers, but also the offenses have generally tend to be plus EV in these questionable weather spots, just because people have been I think too risk adverse. And I think I've been too risk adverse in GPPs at times this year as well when it comes to weather. I got to grow balls and just roll the dice a little bit sometimes with some of these spots that are not completely safe. And yeah, I have, let's see, what is it overall? I have 10% stacks of the Detroit Tigers, and then I have 16% Minnesota Twins stacks. I don't think these teams are going to be picking up very much ownership, partially because Bailey Ober is a really good pitcher, so he's not somebody you typically want to stack against. But then also just because of the fact that there's bad weather, people are going to want to get off of it. So yeah, those are 3 of my 4 most rostered offenses. 2 of them comes from the bad weather game because I think people are going to get off of it.
I get it. That game does scare me though. Not going to lie. I just looked at it again right now. I mean, it's cutting it real close, because it's also not just like a quick line. It looks like a line of storms. It looks like it's going to hold up for a while when it hits. So we'll see. But that's just the way you're playing it. The other way to play it is just fade that game and hope that it rains out.
Yeah, and if you look at once again, so this game is currently scheduled to start at 1 p.m. Eastern time, right? Yeah, 1:10 p.m. Eastern time. The current weather situation, there's only about a 20% chance of rain in the early stages of the game. It gets up to 75% later on, but it's about 2 hours into the game. You never know if those storms are going to come a little bit earlier, a little bit later. But it does appear, especially because the game is scheduled to start 20 minutes from now, it looks like the game is going to start on time. And I do think the most likely scenario here is that the rain holds off until the later innings and kind of becomes not much of an issue for DFS. That's what I think the most likely scenario is. Not the guaranteed one, but most likely.
What other bats do you look to get to on a slate like this where you have some decent pitching?
Yeah. So some of the other teams that are standing out to me, it's going to be some of the good offenses that are going up against pitchers that are also decent, that are pulling some ownership. So, for instance, the Houston Astros offense is one that I have been pretty high on now for the last couple of weeks. I don't think the field has been there quite as much as they should. The Houston Astros are healthy now. This is a team that has been one of the best offenses in baseball for years now.
Mm-hmm.
And because they got off to a slow start this year, I think people have kind of been off of the Houston Astros in the way that they typically would be. They've got a matchup against Chris Bassett. Bassett's good, but not great or anything like that. And you just got a lot of hitters that are great to build your stacks around. Jose Altuve, Yordan Alvarez, Bregman's only $4,100. Jeremy Pena's only $3,900. He's been one of the best hitting shortstops in all of baseball this season. So you're getting modest ownership and a little bit of leverage because Chris Bassett's more popular than what the Houston Astros offense is as a whole. So I think Houston's a good team to be overweight to as well.
I like Houston. We talked about Cincinnati. Like I said, probably just a couple of spots that I'd get to. I don't know. I would like Cincinnati if they weren't popular. Like I didn't expect Cincinnati to be, one of the 4 highest owned stacks right now.
Yeah, they're fourth. So that's a team that, like I said before, of my top 150 lineups in the Sims, only one of them is a red stack. And Marcus Stroman, what we were talking about before, yeah, he's not been overall the best pitcher, but he's still a pitcher who does induce a pretty high ground ball rate. He does have an inflated home run to fly ball rate at Yankee Stadium. I would expect going forward, though, just because of his career history, he's not going to be a guy that yields a ton of home runs. The most likely scenario when you start an offense against Marcus Stroman or play Marcus Stroman in a DFS lineup is you're getting like 6 innings, 3 runs from him, and then like 4 strikeouts or something. It just doesn't give you that much upside on either end of the game.
Agreed. Who pitched for Minnesota yesterday? I can't remember. Oh, Festa, right? Yeah, Festa.
Yeah.
Not to say he's great, but Detroit went out there and hit like 3 or 4 home runs in that game. Reason I mentioned that, and you mentioned it, Einsteinium asked it earlier, if that game does play, Detroit is our highest our most leveraged stack on this slate. Now, that's not saying they have, super high top stack probability, but they right now are virtually unowned as far as hitters go. It's kind of an interesting spot because Bailey Ober isn't immune to giving up power at all. He will still give up some pop.
Yeah, so let me check updated ownership. What is it looking like for Ober now? Has it moved at all?
I'll tell you in a second, unless you get there first.
Yeah, I'm just refreshing. So
we
have the Tigers as... Yeah, we have the Tigers. So here's what's appealing about the Tigers to me. This is the only unowned offense on the slate.
Yeah.
They're projected for 1% ownership. Every other offense on the slate is sub 4% owned. You're also getting a little bit of leverage in those lineups going up against Bailey Ober. I'm overweight to everything in this game. I'm overweight to Ober. I'm overweight to the Twins. I'm overweight to the Detroit Tigers. And I'm not playing the Tigers in single entry, but there's a pretty strong case for getting to the Tigers in single entry just because of how low you could play the Tigers in single entry and be one of like 3 people that play them in single entry contests. But yeah, you're getting a very, very low owned team. And it's very rare on a slate of this size that any team actually warrants being 1% owned. Like for reference in the top stacks tool, we them with a 5% chance to be the top scoring team on the slate at 1.6% projected ownership. This is the most positively leveraged stack of the entire day.
It really is. And there's a good chance that Bailey Ober just goes out there and crushes. The only thing is, are we actually losing leverage on a spot like this because maybe Bailey Ober's ownership is lower than we're projecting because of that rain? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I do think it's pretty likely, like we were saying before, that he comes in lower owned than he's projected for. But even if that's the case, and let's say he's 22% owned, it would still make him one of the most popular pitchers on the slate.
True. Hey, we had a question.
Mm-hmm.
Homers from, where was it? Favorite homer pick, Laffy. All right. So just saw I had a Barstool boost. Is Barstool still around?
I don't think so.
Oh wait, like didn't he buy it back for $1 or something?
But it's ESPN Bet now.
Right. Oh yeah, right.
Maybe it's a thing where because of their partnership, they do a boost there where it's called the Barstool Boost.
Oh, I bet, you know what? I bet you're right. That's what it is for sure.
Yeah. Carlos Soto says the Barstool Boost on BK.
That's what it is for sure. All right, let's see. Let's see. What do you guys have?
The way the Barstool Boost works, for anybody who's watching that doesn't know, is you could take any player and just add plus 200 onto their odds. So generally for this, the way that it makes the most sense is you target whichever player you think is most likely to homer.
Exactly. Short odds. Because going from plus 1,200 to plus 1,400 isn't as impactful as like plus 250 to 450. Absolutely right. So are there good homer spots where you're getting already short odds on these guys? That's the question. And you need it on DraftKings because DraftKings usually jams you up pretty good on home run odds. I can't remember the last time I've seen DraftKings have the best home run odds compared to other books, Greg. I can't remember the last time I've seen that.
Yeah, they used to like a year and a half ago or something, but yeah, that does not really exist at all anymore. I mean, the pretty easy answer for this particular sort of
Aaron
boost,
Judge.
Yeah, Judge. Judge is, oh my God. Dude, this is actually fucking ridiculous. Aaron Judge is plus 135 to homer on DraftKings.
To homer?
Yeah, what is he?
What's he on other books?
Pull up Odd Shopper.
I already have 135. That's insane.
He's plus one. Okay, so listen to this. This is crazy. That's not even the worst odds. Caesars has it at plus 115 for Judge to homer.
Dude, they're giving him close to a 50-50 chance to homer.
The odds. All right, so Circa, BetMGM, Unibet, BetRivers all have him at plus 165. Those are the longest odds for him to homer on any book. With that said, I mean, you could do this boost. I still think this is the right way to play it. Do the boost on Judge, and then you're betting, let's see. So the most I could bet is $10 on this. You're getting Judge plus 335 to homer then. I still think that's the best value.
When you factor in how much it actually moves your payout, you know, and it's a no-brainer that you're looking for guys with shorter odds for sure. It just makes a huge difference. Like there's no reason you go with a guy that's just a total long shot and tack plus, 200 onto it. Doesn't make any sense. Any other stacks you wanted to talk about while I pull up a couple homer spots here?
No, I've hit on my most rostered stacks overall. I could talk about some of the teams that I'm underweight to while it is that you look that up. So I'll talk before about that of the popular teams. The one I have the most of is the New York Yankees. So in turn, the Guardians are projected for a bunch of ownership today. I only have 3% of them. The Boston Red Sox, they're projected for north of 10% ownership. I only have 1% Red Sox stacks. I got 1 out of 150 Cincinnati Red stacks. I do think there's merit to getting to the Texas Rangers for leverage purposes off of Michael King. Whenever you have a shorter slate where there's an offense that isn't pulling all that much ownership and it's a good offense, it's going up against a good but not quite elite pitcher. I like both sides of it. I'm overweight to Michael King, also overweight to the Texas Rangers going up against him. One thing that also does help the Texas Rangers that we saw start happening yesterday, Corey Seager back in the lineup. Corey Seager, I think, was one of the best overall plays on the slate yesterday. He wasn't initially in the lineup. We ended up getting him included into the lineup. I think it was like 20 minutes before lock. So Corey Seager only ended up being 4% owned yesterday. But I mean, more importantly, overall is just that he's in the lineup today. Marcus Semien is not going to be in the lineup, but overall, Corey Seager being back is a really big boost to the Texas Rangers. I think that's a decent leverage spot.
I like that too. Yeah. if I'm looking at one spot, we mentioned maybe some Cincinnati bats where Stroman has run into issues at home. 10 of his 12 home runs have come at home this season. Minnesota righties against Kenta Maeda are another spot that I like. He's actually a true reverse splits guy, Greg. And I usually try not, you don't want to ever buy too much into something like that. But if you were looking, if you had boosts and you were looking to maybe make it a little bit more interesting, we have the true odds on Jeffers at plus 670. If you boosted that on DraftKings, you're getting it to 750. So that's fine. Let's see. Carlos Correa. Let's see if we can actually get it well past those true odds. And if you have anyone else you wanted to throw out there, go for it. Just interrupt me here.
I just think the answer is very clearly Aaron Judge.
Oh, for sure. For sure. But people are going to want to, sometimes people want something that's a little bit, you know how it goes.
Yeah.
Correa, you could get Correa to plus 750 as well, plus 700 on. So that would still be plus EV if you're doing that. I mean, if you're boosting these and you're not getting it to plus EV, you're in a world of hurt. With a 200 boost, it's crazy.
What are you just filtering by home run bets in Odd Shopper on DraftKings and then sorting it by win rate?
Yeah, and I was also just looking at certain pitchers, first-handedness, park, totals, and all of that stuff, and then going over and looking some of them up. By the way, if you can't bet legally in your state, Underdog has pick'em contest, first match deposit 50% up to $250. So well worth checking out. Link to that in the description and in chat. They've got 15 or 17 million in best ball prizes, daily drafts for all of the sports. Best site covers everything, just everything. I'm there, Greg's there for sure. Many of you guys are probably already there. So why am I even saying this? But if you're not, 50% match up to 250. And if you want to check the Sims tools out, we talk about them, we run them, we use them every day. We've had a 200K winner, a 60K, and a 50K just in the last 2 weeks. Multiple 5-figure wins, a lot of 5K wins using the Sims tool, shouting us out, rocking the avatar. It's Stochastic. Links to that for a week or a month in the description. And if you have questions, hit Greg up, hit me up. We're happy to help you out and answer any of those so you're not starting behind the 8-ball. All right, what do you got for me?
So I went and I filtered by all of our most frequent odds for players to homer and Odd Shopper today. And we have 6 batters that we have with at least a 20% chance to homer. Number one, it's Aaron Judge by a mile at 35%. Soto and Yordan Alvarez are both 23%. We got Rhys Hoskins and Gunnar Henderson at 21%. Then Anthony Santander at 20%. So those would be the list of people I think you could reasonably choose from. And like we said before, Judge is just with a bullet, the best option.
Yep. Hey, appreciate you guys hanging out. You follow Greg at Ehrenberg DFS. I'm at Loughran_D. You see it right there under our names. Have a great 4th of July. Enjoy it. Stay safe. Don't do anything dumb. And if you do, don't drive afterwards. Shout out to Richard for producing this show, and we'll catch you guys back here for the next one. Peace.